Chivali. So, hello everyone. आवाज आ रही है क्या मेरी? हेलो. हाँ ठीक है, सही आवाज आ रही है, चलो. So, hi everyone. It's ईरान वर्सेस यूएसए रिलेशंस. आज अपन ट्राई कर रहे हैं कि लेट्स अंडरस्टैंड हाउ ईरान वर्सेस यूएसए एक्चुअली डेवलप्ड फ्रॉम द स्टार्टिंग. लाइक इनके स्टार्टिंग से ही रिलेशन कैसे रहे हैं. देयर वर सम मेजर इंसिडेंट्स एज वेल. उनको अपन नोट कर देंगे साथ साथ सो दैट कि एक लास्ट में क्विक समरी बना सकें अपन. तो sorry, for the context, most of the articles, or maybe like all of the articles, are from Wikipedia. I'm not saying or I'm not claiming any authority over the articles as well. Iran versus USA is a well known conflict in the world geopolitics right now. And not this right now, it's from the starting. So let's go to the starting. Relation between Iran and US in modern day are unsettled and have a troubled history. Yeah, that's the truth. स्टार्टिंग से ही इनका ऐसे है. They begin in the mid to late 19th century when Iran was known to the Western world as Persia. Persia was a very, very, very ये क्या होता है? And ये क्या है? मेरे ख्याल से टाइपिंग एरर है. Sorry. So Persia was a British and Russian colonial interest. Persia was very of British and colonial interest during the Great Game. So what is Great Game? The Great Game was a rivalry between the 19th century British and Russian empires over influence in the Central Asia, primarily Afghanistan, Persia, and Tibet. Okay, so here we go for the Great Game. Russia conquered Turkestan and Britain expanded and set the borders of British India. By the early 20th century, a line of independent state tribes and monarchies from the shore of the Caspian Sea to the eastern Himalayas were made into the protectorates. Yeah, protectorate in the context of international relation is a state or dependent territory that foregoes an independent foreign policy in favor of alliance with the चलो सही है. And territories of the two empires. Now it's much better. थोड़ा इससे The Great Game was marked by distrust, diplomatic intrigue, and the religion wars. It never erupted into a full-scale war directly between Russia and British colonial forces. However, the two nations battled in the Crimean War. Crimean War was fought between the Russian Empire and an alliance of the Ottoman Empire. Yeah. Crimean War, okay, okay. Yeah. इसको तो मैं पढ़ी Crimean War रहा था. The United Kingdom and okay. Crimean War हुई थी 1853 to 1856 between Russia and England or Britain, whatever, which affected the Great Game. Russia and the British Empire also cooperated numerous times during the Great Game, and including treaties and Afghan Boundary Commission. What was Afghan Boundary Commission was a joint effort by the UK and the Russian Empire to determine the north boundary of Afghanistan. Okay, ये भी सही है. क्रिमियन वॉर होगी, क्राइमिया, क्रीमिया, क्रिमियन बोल रहे हैं। Britain feared Russia southward expansion toward would threaten India, while Russia feared the expansion of British interest into Central Asia, and result Britain made it a high priority to protect all approaches to India, while Russia continued its military conquest of Central Asia. Aware of the importance of India to British, Russia efforts in the region often had the aim of extorting concessions from them in Europe. Okay, सही है भाई। ये तो चलो इनका अलग साइड में चल ही रहा था। अब कहाँ पे थे? ग्रेट गेम। By contrast, the United States was seen as a more trustworthy foreign power, and the Americans, listen this, were even appointed treasurer general by the Shahs of the time. ये Shahs क्या था भाई? And the monarchs of Indian, including three queens, regents. Okay. So जो उस टाइम के रूरल्स होते थे उन्होंने यूएसए के साइड थोड़ा फेवर किया था. During the World War II, Iran was invaded by the UK and the Soviet Union, both US allies, but relation continued to be positive after the World War until the later years of government of Muhammad, who was overthrown by a coup organized in Malaysia, headed by MI6. So, what is MI6? Okay, so MI6, M16 is the M16 or MI6 is the in sorry, अरे यार उसको क्या बोलते हैं जो CIA है अपने इंडिया में रो है. Okay, so ये basically एजेंसी है यूके की, ठीक है, M16 or MI6 whatever. And this was followed by an era of close alliance between Shah Muhammad's authoritarian regime and the US government, Iran being one of the US closest allies during the World War, which was in turn followed by a dramatic reversal and disagreement between the two countries after the 1979. Okay, so before 1971, before 1979, USA and Israel relation were pretty good. अभी तक अपने को ये समझ है. The two nations have had no formal diplomatic relations since April 7, 1980. Instead, Pakistan serves as Iranian protecting power in the United States, while Switzerland serves as United States protecting power in Iran. चलो ये भी सही है भाई, इसको बंद करो यार. So since April 7, 1980, no formal diplomats. चलो ये भी सही है भाई. Contacts are carried out through the Iranian intersection of the Pakistan embassy in Washington. चलो ये तो ठीक है, ये निकाला गया. Iranians' explanations for the animosity with the US include the natural and unavoidable conflict between the Islamic system. हाँ ये भी सच है यार, ये इसमें सिया सुन्नी का भी बहुत ज़्यादा रोल है सॉरी. यूएस सपोर्ट फॉर इसराइल, ये भी है। यूएसए अगर इसराइल को सपोर्ट करेगा तो ऑटोमेटिकली भाई किसी ना किसी के साथ तो बिगड़ेगी। और मुस्लिम कंट्रीज तो इसराइल को वैसे भी सपोर्ट नहीं करती ना। In West, however, different explanations have been considered, including the Iranian government need for a national boogeyman. Boogeyman, what is boogeyman? Is a creature typically used to frighten children into good behavior. To furnish a pretext for domestic repression against the pre-democratic forces, and to bind the government to its loyal constituency. Con- Constituency. Okay, constituency. The United States attributes the worsening of relation to the 1979 ईरान हॉस्टेज क्राइसिस। हाँ भाई, जो ये ईरान हॉस्टेज क्राइसिस थी ना, ये भी बड़ा इम्पोर्टेंट रोल प्ले करती है। The 1979 to 81. Iran repeated human rights abuse since the Islamic Revolution. Different restrictions on using spy method on democratic revolutions by the US and anti-Western ideology. Its nuclear program and political, financial, and the military support to the armed group. Okay, यार ये तो सच है भाई। ईरान बहुत ज़्यादा इस्लामिक आइडियोलॉजी रखता है। इट्स अ एक्सट्रीम ऑफ इट्स ओन। सो ह्यूमन राइट्स तो वहाँ पे एग्जिस्ट करते ही नहीं है। देयर इज नथिंग लाइक ह्यूमन राइट्स ओवर देयर। Since 1995, the United States has had an embargo on trade with Iran. So sanction or embargoes are commercial and financial penalties applied by the states or institution against state, group or individual. Economic sanctions are a form of coercion that coercion or क्या बोलते हैं इसको नहीं पता भाई। Attempts to get an actor to change its behavior through disruption in economic change. Okay, so उसके ईरान के ऊपर थोड़ा प्रेशर डालने के लिए इन्होंने एम्बार्गो लगा रखा है ईरान में। सही है। In 2016 more sanctions against Iran were lifted and the Trump administration unilaterally withdrew from the nuclear deal and reimposed sanctions in 2018। ये भी सच है यार, एक बार ट्रम्प के आने से पहले तो बहन के रिलेशन फिर भी थोड़े बेटर हो गए थे ओबामा के टाइम पे। Known as the maximum pressure campaign against Iran in response, Iran usually reduced its commitment under the nuclear deal and eventually exceeded pre-JCPOA enrichment level। ये शायद से उसका टाइम था। Joint comprehensive plan of action। ये इनकी ईरान डील हुई थी, मतलब न्यूक्लियर डील हुई थी 2015 में। उससे पहले का है। Biden administration did not relax the economic sanction against Iran and, and instead implemented more measures। The second Trump administration reimposed the maximum pressure approach on Iran। भी है यार। सॉरी। Okay, so let's go to the history. यहाँ से start करते हैं यार अपना early relation. Let's go to the early relation. American newspapers in the 1720s were unfairly pro-Iranian. The text again. यार अमेरिकन न्यूज़पेपर अमेरिका ना हमेशा से ईरान के खिलाफ नहीं था भाई और अमेरिका तो कभी किसी के सपोर्ट में परमानेंट हुआ भी नहीं है एक्सेप्ट इजराइल वो भी जूइश सेंटिमेंट की वजह से अमेरिकन न्यूज़पेपर पर uninformedly uniformly नहीं uniformly pro-Iranian especially during the revolt of Afghan Amir Mohammed ये तो बहुत पुराना आ गया यार US had the little interest in Persian affairs while the US as a trust fund and did not suffer. Yeah. और फिर वही है यार Persian again showed the the help in strengthening out its finances after the World War First. Mission was opposed by powerful vested interests and eventually was withdrawn with this with its task incomplete. And during the Persian Revolution in 1909, ये भी है यार ये क्या रखा अगर अपन थोड़ा बैकग्राउंड में म्यूजिक चला ले तो भाई सही हो जाएगा ना थोड़ा सा ऐसे ठीक है Russian constitutional revolution हुई थी 1909 में American died in Tabriz while fighting with the militia in a battle against lawless forces after the Iranian parliament appointed by the US financier and Morgan as a Treasurer General of Iran in 1911. An American was killed in Tehran by gunmen thought to be affiliated with the Russian or British interests. हाँ ये भी है यार, किलिंग्स तो वहाँ पे स्टार्टिंग से होती रही है। फिर जो मेजर टर्न आया था ना भाई, यूएस और ईरान और यूएस एंड ईरान की जो फॉरेन पॉलिसीज थी, वो यहाँ पे 1983 का ईरानियन कू हुआ था ना, जो उस टाइम पे स्टार्ट हुआ था। Until the outbreak of World War II, the US had no active policy towards the Iran. So देखो बोल रहा था ना मैं। When the Cold War began, the US was alarmed by the attempt attempt by the Soviet Union to set up separatist states in Iranian Azerbaijan and Kurdistan. Okay, as well it demanded for military rights to. ये क्या है? अच्छा, सही है। सही है भाई, सही है। टर्की का कहीं पे कुछ होगा इसमें, ठीक है, अपना ओके लेना है। दिस fear was enhanced by the loss of China to communism. सो आगे बात कहाँ पे आ रही है कि एट द एंड था क्या कि भाई यूएस अपनी कॉलोनीज एस्टेब्लिश कर रहा था, अगर कॉलोनीज भी ना हो तो एटलीस्ट कि भाई इस तरह की फॉरेन स्टेट्स जो उसको बिल्कुल फेवर करती हैं और उसकी आइडियोलॉजी हाँ सेम रहे, वही सीन है। तो उसी के रिलेटेड इन्होंने ईरान की साइड देखना स्टार्ट किया था, क्योंकि रशिया के बाद चाइना भी तो अपना भाई, मतलब चाइना भी तो अपना रशिया की तरह कम्युनिज्म की साइड जा रहा था ना, कम्युनिज्म में हो गया था वो तो। प्राइम मिनिस्टर इन 1951 ईरान नेशनलाइज इन ऑयल इंडस्ट्री। हाँ, ये भी बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट एक इंसिडेंट था। अरे कैसे? ये भी इम्पोर्टेंट था भाई। 1951 में ईरान nationalized its oil industry, effectively seizing the assets of Anglo-Iranian oil company। ये जो उस टाइम का इनका प्राइम मिनिस्टर था, उसने ईरान के सारे ऑयल रिजर्व को नेशनलाइज कर दिया था, जो कि पहले ब्रिटेन के अंडर थे ना, उनका जो ये हो रखा था। अरे जो इनकी ट्रीटी हो रखी थी ब्रिटेन के साथ। At the same time, US honored the British embargo without Truman's knowledge. The Central Intelligence Agency stationed in Tehran and have been carrying out covert activities against Mossad and National Front at least since December of 1952। ये भी भाई इनका चल ही रहा था नीचे नीचे यूएस ट्राई कर रहा था कि भाई ब्रिटेन के फेवर में हो जाए इनकी ईरान की पॉलिसीज। The coup, in 1953, US and Britain orchestrated a coup to overthrow Iranian Prime Minister, fearing communist influence and economic instability after Iran nationalized its oil industry. The coup led by CIA and M16 initially failed but succeeded on a second attempt. ये भी है भाई, पहली बार में नहीं मिली सफलता उनको, दूसरी बार में हुआ। It reinstalled Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who then received substantial US financial and military support. The US helped establish SAVAK। SAVAK जो था ना, ये एक तरह का ब्यूरो ऑफ इंटेलिजेंस एंड सिक्योरिटी ऑफ स्टेट था, जो कि टोटली एक तरह से सीक्रेट पुलिस थी, मतलब बिल्कुल सीक्रेटली ही काम कर रही थी। उनके पास ना उनको फालतू टेंशन, ये डायरेक्टली उसके रूलर को रिपोर्ट करते थे। See, the Shah's brutal secret police to maintain its rule. Many liberal Iranians believe that the coup and the subsequent US support for Shah enabled the Shah's arbitrary rule, contributing the contributing to the deeply anti-American character of 1979 revolution later। सही है यार, उस टाइम पे पहले इनकी कूप करवाया 1953 में यूएस एंड यूएस यूएस एंड यूके ने मिलके। फिर जो इन्होंने सबक बनाई थी, जो एजेंसी थी इनकी, एक तरह से सीक्रेट फोर्स, उसी की वजह से फिर लोगों को प्रॉब्लम होने लगी गवर्नमेंट के साथ, तो 1979 की रिवॉल्यूशन का कारण बनी। After the coup, US states played a central role in reorganizing Iran oil sector under US pressure. BP joined a consortium of Western companies to resume Iranian export, Iranian oil export. US Shah alliance। यार बहुत बड़ा टॉपिक है यार ये तो, कितना टाइम हो गया अपने को स्टार्ट करें, 35 मिनट्स तो हो ही गई। In 1953 US President launched Iran's nuclear program। ये देखो भाई, जो अभी यूएसए को प्रॉब्लम हो रही है ना कि भाई ईरान न्यूक्लियर वेपन क्यों बना रहा है, वो प्रोग्राम ही इनका लॉन्च इन्होंने यूएसए ने खुद करा था 1953 में। एंड in 1967 the US helped Iran create its nuclear program by providing Tehran Research Reactor, the nation's first reactor, as well as a 5.58 kgs of enriched uranium. Iran is one of the 51 original signatories of the Treaty of Pro- Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons (NPT) on July 1968। अच्छा, 1967 में ईरान ईरान को खुद इन्होंने प्रोवाइड कर दिया, फिर इन्हीं से साइन पे करवा लिया कि भाई आप, एक्सपेंड नहीं करोगे, मतलब न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स नहीं बनाओगे। Parliament ratified the treaty in Feb 1970. The participation of US and Western European governments continued until 1979. So until and unless like 1979 की जो ईरान रेवोल्यूशन था, everything was fine between US and ईरान almost. लाइक यूएस से उसके न्यूक्लियर प्रोग्राम को फंड भी कर रहा था और उसको हर चीज़ प्रोवाइड कर रहा था। यहाँ पे इसने पहले तो 5.5 kgs ऑफ एनरिच्ड यूरेनियम दिया। स्ट्रेटेजिक एंड जियोपॉलिटिकल strategic alliance and geopolitical importance. Iran's border with Soviet Union and its position as the largest, most powerful country in the oil-rich Persian Gulf made Iran a pillar of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. In 1960, Iran joined Iraq with Saudi Arabia and Venezuela to form the Organization of Petrol OPEC. OPEC join करा था 1960 में ईरान ने, aiming to challenge the dominance of Western oil companies and reclaim over national oil sources. In the 1960s and 1970s, Iran's oil revenues grew considerably. Beginning in the mid 1960s, beginning in the 1960s, this development weakened as US influence in the Iranian politics while strengthening the Iranian state power over the population. By the 1970s, surging OPEC profits gave the group substantial leverage over Western economies, and elevated Iran's strategic value to US ally. According to the scholar, this put US in the contradictory position of being regarded by the Iranian public as the chief architect and structure of the regime, while its real influence in domestic politics declined considerably. 1970s के बाद तो यार बहुत ज़्यादा इनकी इन्फ्लुएंस कम होता जा ही रहा था। ये देखो इनका मिलिट्री कॉरपोरेशन आ गया अभी। So, military corporation and arms sales. James Bill and other historians have said that between 1969 and 1974, U.S. President Richard Nixon actively recruited the Shah as the American puppet and proxy. However, Richard Alvandy argues that it worked the other way around, with the Shah taking the initiative. President Nixon, who had first met the Shah in 1953, regarded him as a westernizing anti-communist statesman who deserved American support. Now that now that the British were withdrawing from the region, they met again in 1972. The Shah agreed to buy large quantities of American military hardware and took responsibility for ensuring political stability and fighting off Soviet supervision throughout the region. Permitting Iran to purchase US arms served Cold War objective by securing the Shah's alignment with Washington after Iran had briefly explored Soviet alternatives in 1960s, while also benefiting the American economy. However, because of the 1973 Arab-Israel war, the subsequent Arab oil embargo against the US trade, oil prices became very high. This enabled the Shah to buy more advanced weaponry than US officials had expected, which caused concern in Washington. In the 1970s, approximately 25,000 American technicians were deployed to Iran to maintain military equipment such as F-14 and that had been sold to the Shah's government. So हुआ क्या कि 1973 के टाइम तो ऑयल एम्बार्गो की वजह से प्राइस हाई हो गया था ऑयल का, और इनके पास ज़्यादा परचेजिंग पावर आ गई थी ईरान के पास, क्योंकि यार ऑब्वियसली इनको ज़्यादा प्रॉफिट हो रहा था. यार बहुत हो गया भाई, मैं तो थक गया आज. बाकी ब्रेक के बाद करते हैं, अगली स्ट्रीम करता हूँ थोड़ी देर में.